The house was quieter than usual that evening, the kind of quiet that settles in after a long day and invites you to finally exhale. The lamps were dim, the television murmured softly in the background, and outside, the streetlight flickered over an empty road. He sat on the couch, half lost in his thoughts when he noticed it. The dog wasn't beside him. She stood at the front window, perfectly still. Not sitting. Not pacing. Just standing, nose close to the glass, ears tilted forward. Body tense in a way that made his chest tighten. First he smiled. Dogs did strange things sometimes. Maybe she'd seen a cat. Or a shadow. But minutes passed and she didn't move. When he called her name, she didn't turn. Her tail didn't wag. Instead, a low whine slipped from her throat, soft but urgent, as if she were trying to say something without knowing how. She shifted her weight, paws pressing into the floor, blocking the window as if guarding it. A chill crawled up his arms. He stood, walked closer, and placed a hand on her back. He could feel the trembling beneath her fur. "It's okay," he whispered, though he wasn't sure who he was reassuring, her or himself. Outside nothing looked wrong. Just darkness. Just stillness. Then she barked. Once. Sharp. Warning. His heart began to pound as she refused to step aside. Eyes locked on something he couldn't see. He leaned toward the glass, breath shallow, trying to understand what had captured her so completely. But what the dog sensed was far from ordinary. Before we continue, remember to like, share, and subscribe for more heart-touching dog stories. And tell me, where are you watching from? The evening settled into the house gently, not all at once, but slowly, the way calm always does when it knows it won't be disturbed. The air inside was warm, carrying the faint smell of dinner still lingering from earlier. Soap, clean dishes, a hint of coffee from a mug left on the counter. Outside, the sky had already darkened into a soft blue-gray, streetlights flickering on one by one like quiet sentinels. He sat on the couch, shoulders loose, feet stretched forward. The television murmured low. Not loud enough to demand attention, just enough to keep the silence company. After a long day, this was his favorite part. The pause. He glanced down, expecting to see her there. The familiar weight pressed against his leg. Warm fur. Steady breathing. A tail that thumped once when he shifted. But the space beside him was empty. He frowned slightly and lifted his head. She stood at the front window, perfectly still. At first it didn't strike him as strange. Dogs watched windows all the time. Cars passed. Neighbors walked by. Squirrels made bold appearances they didn't deserve. He smiled faintly and leaned back again, eyes drifting to the ceiling. The house creaked softly, settling into itself as the temperature outside dropped. Somewhere down the street, a door closed. A distant engine hummed, then faded. Minutes passed. He checked the time on his phone. She hadn't moved. That was when something tightened just a little behind his ribs. She wasn't sitting. She wasn't pacing. She was standing, weight balanced forward, nose close to the glass without touching it. Her ears were angled sharply ahead. Every muscle pulled into quiet attention. Her tail hung low, not tucked but not relaxed either. Alert. Listening. He cleared his throat. "Hey girl." No response. Usually, she turned at the sound of his voice. Usually there was at least a flick of the ear. This time nothing. He stood and crossed the room, footsteps soft against the hardwood. The closer he got, the more he noticed the details. The way her chest rose and fell a little faster than normal. The slight tension in her shoulders. The way her paws were planted as if she had decided, very firmly, not to move. "Whatcha got?" he asked gently. Still she didn't look at him. A soft sound slipped from her throat. Not a bark. Not a growl. A whine. Low. Barely there. It stopped him mid-step. He rested a hand on her back. Her fur was warm beneath his palm, but her body trembled. Just enough to feel. Just enough to matter. "It's okay," he whispered. The words came out automatically. A habit. He peered through the glass, squinting into the dark. The porch light cast a small yellow circle onto the concrete outside. Beyond that, nothing. The street lay quiet. No people. No movement. Just shadows stretching long beneath the trees. She shifted slightly, placing herself more directly between him and the window. Protective. The air felt different then. He couldn't explain it. Nothing had changed, and yet everything had. The television behind them faded into background noise. His focus narrowed, heart beginning to beat just a little faster. He lowered his voice instinctively, as if raising it might break something fragile. "You see something, huh?" Her ears twitched. She leaned forward, nose lifting, drawing in the night air through the narrow crack near the window frame. Her breathing changed, slow and deliberate. Scenting. He followed her gaze again. Still nothing. A flicker of doubt crossed his face. Maybe a raccoon. Maybe a stray cat moving between yards. He almost laughed at himself for feeling uneasy. This was a safe neighborhood. Quiet. Predictable. She let out a single bark. Sharp. Controlled. Not loud but intentional. His stomach dropped. She had never barked like that inside the house. Never. He reached for the light switch near the door and flipped it on. The porch flooded with brightness, chasing shadows into corners. He leaned closer to the glass, breath fogging it slightly. The street remained still. Too still. Behind him, she refused to step back. Instead, she pressed forward again, her body a firm line of resistance. Her nails clicked softly against the floor as she adjusted her stance, holding her ground. Another whine. This one longer. Urgent. His pulse quickened, palms growing damp. "It's all right," he said again, slower this time, less certain. He crouched beside her, bringing his eyes level with hers. Finally, she turned her head just enough to look at him. Her eyes were wide, focused, searching his face, as if asking a question she already knew the answer to. "Do you feel it too?" He swallowed. Outside, a breeze moved through the trees, leaves whispering against one another. Somewhere nearby, metal clinked softly, maybe a gate, maybe something else. She stiffened instantly. Her gaze snapped back to the window. Her body followed. He stayed frozen, listening, waiting. The quiet no longer felt peaceful. It felt like a held breath. And deep down, beneath logic, beneath reason, he knew this wasn't nothing. Not tonight. Not with her standing guard. Because whatever had captured her attention, whatever waited beyond the glass, was already closer than he realized. He stayed where he was for a moment, crouched beside her, hands still resting on her back. The house seemed to notice his stillness and respond in kind. Even the refrigerator hum felt quieter. The television behind them slipped into a commercial, voices rising and falling without meaning. Her attention never left the window. Not for a second. She shifted again, slow and deliberate, adjusting her stance so her body lined up squarely with the glass. Her ears angled forward, then slightly outward, catching sounds from different directions. Her tail lifted just a little, stiff, unmoving. This wasn't curiosity. It was assessment. He'd seen it before, just never like this. At the vet's office. On walks when an unfamiliar dog appeared too suddenly. In moments when her instincts clicked on before his mind could catch up. But this was different. There was no visible trigger. No sound he could clearly identify. No movement he could point to and say, "That's it." He rose slowly to his feet. Didn't rush. Didn't want to startle her, or whatever she was focused on. He leaned closer to the glass again, palms resting against the cool surface. The porch light reflected his face back at him, pale and uncertain. Beyond it, the street lay quiet under the glow of street lamps. Too quiet. A breeze stirred, carrying the faint smell of damp leaves and asphalt. Somewhere far off, a dog barked once, then fell silent. Her ears flicked at the sound, but she didn't relax. If anything, her posture tightened. He tried to recall the last time she'd acted like this. Months ago, maybe longer. There had been a night storm, thunder cracking close enough to rattle the windows. She trembled then, panted, pressed herself against his legs. Tonight she wasn't afraid. She was focused. He spoke her name again, softer this time, almost reverent. She didn't look at him. Instead, she took a single step forward, then another. Her nose hovered inches from the glass, breath leaving faint fog that vanished as quickly as it appeared. Her chest rose deep and slow as she drew in air through her nose, testing it, reading it. He noticed the subtle changes, the way her whiskers angled forward, the slight narrowing of her eyes, the stillness that settled over her entire body, as if she were listening to something beyond sound. He followed her gaze downward, toward the bottom edge of the window, toward the shadows near the porch steps. His throat tightened. "There's nothing there," he murmured. But the words didn't convince him. They were said out of habit, reflex, something humans said when they needed to believe it. She let out another sound. Not a bark this time. A short huff of breath. Controlled. A warning she hadn't escalated yet. He stepped back half a pace, giving her space. She took it immediately, positioning herself directly in front of the window. Shoulders squared, paws planted wide. Her body formed a barrier without aggression, without panic. Just purpose. His heart began to beat faster. He checked the lock on the door beside the window. It was secure. He slid the deadbolt just to be sure, the soft click sounding louder than it should have. She reacted instantly. Her head snapped toward the sound, then back to the window. She knew the difference. The lock wasn't the problem. He moved to the side window, peering out at the yard. The fence stood intact. The trash bins were lined neatly against it. No movement. No sign of disturbance. When he glanced back, she hadn't followed him. She stayed exactly where she was. That's when it truly settled in. Whatever she sensed wasn't everywhere. It was specific. Targeted. Outside the front window, something shifted. Not visibly. Not clearly. But the air changed. He felt it in the way his shoulders lifted unconsciously. In the way his breath shallowed. In the way his skin prickled along his arms. She stiffened. Her tail rose higher now, straight and still. Her ears pressed forward, then tilted slightly, adjusting like fine instruments. She was listening to something he couldn't hear. He stood frozen, eyes locked on the darkness beyond the glass. Seconds stretched. Then minutes. Nothing happened. And yet, nothing felt resolved. The longer she stood there, the more his certainty unraveled. Dogs didn't hold tension like this without reason. Not his dog. She was steady, thoughtful, careful. She didn't react to nothing. He whispered her name again, barely audible. This time she glanced back at him, just for a moment. Her eyes met his, and in them he saw something that sent a chill through him. Not fear. Urgency. As if she were waiting for him to understand. He exhaled slowly and nodded without realizing he was doing it. "Okay," he said quietly. The word felt like a promise. She turned back to the window immediately, satisfied, at least for now. Outside, the breeze died down. The leaves went still. The streetlight flickered once, then steadied. The house held its breath. And so did he. Because deep inside, beneath the comfort of routine and the illusion of safety, a new awareness took shape. She wasn't watching the night. She was guarding it. And whatever had drawn her attention, whatever had triggered this sudden, unwavering fixation, had not left yet. Time passed in quiet fragments. Not minutes exactly. Just moments that stretched longer than they should have. He checked his phone again. No alerts. No messages. The time glowed back at him, ordinary and unremarkable. The kind of time that insisted everything was fine. He wanted to believe it. She remained at the window, posture unchanged, as if carved there. Every so often her ears shifted, a precise adjustment, not random. Her breathing stayed measured. Controlled. Too controlled. He rubbed his palms together, trying to shake the chill that had settled into his fingers. The house still felt safe. Familiar. The same walls. The same floor. The same front door he'd walked through 1,000 times. This was his home. Nothing bad happened here. "Hey," he said gently, forcing a lightness into his voice. "You're working yourself up." The words were more for him than for her. He stepped closer again and crouched beside her, lowering himself into her space without crowding it. He scratched behind her ear the way she liked slow, steady pressure. Normally that was enough to melt her focus, to pull her back into the room. Tonight she barely reacted. Her ear flicked once under his fingers. That was it. He chuckled softly, though the sound felt thin in his own ears. Gonna guard the house from ghosts now? She didn't move. Didn't blink. Didn't relax. The joke fell flat and disappeared into the quiet. He straightened and paced the living room, trying to bleed off the nervous energy building in his chest. The floor creaked beneath his steps, the sound grounding. Familiar. Real. He walked into the kitchen, turned on the light. The hum of the overhead fixture filled the room. He poured a glass of water, watching his reflection ripple across the surface as he drank. Nothing followed him. No sudden noise. No crash. No reason to be on edge. When he returned to the living room, she was still there. Exactly there. Not an inch of movement. A flicker of irritation crept in. Not at her, but at the feeling itself. The unease. The sense that something invisible was controlling the room. Come on, he said softly, snapping his fingers once. Bedtime. Usually, that word alone earned him a glance. A tail wag. A slow, dramatic stretch before she followed. Tonight she didn't even acknowledge it. Her attention remained fixed. Her body remained set. He sighed and sat back down on the couch, rubbing his face with both hands. He told himself this was nothing more than a dog reacting to something small. A sound. A scent carried on the wind. Animals were sensitive. Sometimes too sensitive. He glanced at the window again, forcing himself to see what logic demanded. The street was empty. A parked car sat under the lamp 2 houses down. The trees swayed slightly, their shadows shifting lazily across the pavement. No figures. No movement. Nothing threatening. She let out another quiet sound. A low whine. Short. Restrained. It pulled his attention back instantly. Hey, hey, he murmured, walking toward her again. He knelt, meeting her gaze. You're okay. This time when he touched her chest he felt it, her heartbeat. Fast. Faster than it should have been. He swallowed. All right, he said after a moment, standing again. Maybe you need to go out. The idea gave him something to do. Something practical. A solution that fit neatly into reason. Dogs got restless when they needed fresh air. She didn't respond. He reached for her leash, lifting it from the hook by the door. The familiar jingle echoed softly through the room. Usually that sound was magic. Tonight she stiffened. Her ears angled back for the first time since the tension began. Not fear, resistance. Her head turned slightly, just enough to acknowledge the leash. Then she turned back to the window. No. That single word seemed to hang between them. He hesitated. A flicker of doubt passed through him. She had never refused a walk. Not once. He set the leash down slowly, the metal clip clicking faintly against the wood. The sound made her flinch just a little. Then she steadied herself again. His chest tightened. Okay, he said quietly. Okay. He stood beside her now, close enough to feel her warmth without touching. He followed her line of sight again, scanning the street. He still saw nothing, and that somehow made it worse, because if there was nothing there, then what was she responding to? He tried one last time to rationalize it. Maybe she heard something in the walls. A mouse. Pipes shifting as the temperature dropped. Sounds he'd tuned out years ago. That had to be it. He forced himself to believe it. He stepped away from the window and turned his back to her, walking toward the hallway. I'm going to brush my teeth, he said aloud. You stay. He waited. Listen. Expected to hear her follow. Her pause never moved. The quiet followed him down the hall, heavy and watchful. He paused near the bathroom doorway and glanced back over his shoulder. She was still there, silhouetted against the glass. Unmoving. Guarding. Something inside him finally gave way. A subtle shift. The moment when dismissal turns into doubt. He returned to the living room and stood beside her once more, heart thudding softly in his chest. He didn't speak this time, didn't touch her, just stood with her and waited. Because even though he hadn't seen anything, even though logic told him this was nothing, he could no longer shake the feeling that she wasn't wrong. He was simply missing the signs. The night deepened. Not suddenly, but gradually, the way darkness always does when it's allowed to linger. The street outside dimmed further as the houses settled into sleep. A few porch lights switched off. A television flickered behind a neighbor's curtains, then went dark. Inside, the house remained awake. So did she. He checked the time again. Later than he'd thought. Later than was comfortable. He rolled his shoulders, trying to release the tension that had settled there, but it stayed. A tight, unfamiliar weight. He walked to the thermostat and nudged it down a degree, the soft click echoing through the quiet. She reacted instantly. Her head snapped toward the sound, then back to the window. Her stance widened. That was when he noticed it. She wasn't just standing there. She was braced. Her front paws were set farther apart now, claws gripping lightly at the floor. Her weight had shifted forward, chest lifted, neck extended. The muscles along her back formed a subtle ridge beneath her fur. She had anchored herself. "Hey," he whispered. "It's just me." He approached slowly, palms open, movements deliberate. He crouched in front of her, searching her face. Her eyes flicked to him for half a second, then back to the glass. She exhaled sharply through her nose. Another warning. He followed her gaze again, this time dropping lower, scanning the ground near the porch steps. Shadows pooled there, thick and unmoving. The porch light cast long lines across the concrete, turning every dark corner into something suspicious. Still nothing moved. She shifted sideways suddenly, blocking him. The motion was calm, controlled. No panic, no aggression, just refusal. His breath caught. She had placed herself directly between him and the window. A barrier. "Okay," he murmured. "Okay, I get it." Did he? His heart beat harder now, each thump distinct in his ears. He stood and stepped to the side, testing her reaction. She mirrored him immediately. A quiet dance. Left. Right. Always between him and the glass. His mouth went dry. "All right," he said softly, lifting both hands. "You win." He backed away a step. She didn't follow. She stayed, guarding her position. The television clicked off automatically after hours of inactivity, plunging the room into deeper silence. Without its low murmur, every sound felt sharper. The hum of electricity, the faint tick of the clock on the wall, his own breathing. She released another sound, a short bark lower than before. Not loud enough to alarm the neighbors, loud enough to matter. That was the moment his doubt turned into something else. Trust. Not blind trust. Instinctive trust. The kind that forms when you realize someone else is seeing something you can't, and has no reason to lie. He walked to the front door and checked the locks again. Deadbolt secure. Chain latched. He tested the handle anyway just to feel the resistance. She watched him closely now, head turning just enough to track his movement while her body remained fixed toward the window. Her priorities were clear. He grabbed his phone and turned on the flashlight, the beam slicing through the darkness outside. He moved the light slowly across the porch, the railing, the steps, the edge of the yard. The beam caught nothing but stillness. She growled. Not loud, barely more than a vibration in her chest. He froze. The sound didn't escalate. Didn't need to. He lowered the phone slightly, heart hammering. "I'm here," he whispered. "It's okay." The words felt small, inadequate. She didn't relax. If anything, her body stiffened further, ears now angled outward, catching sound from both directions. Her tail lifted fully, straight and unmoving. He realized then, truly realized, that she wasn't reacting to a single moment. She was tracking something, something that hadn't gone away. He stepped back again. This time he didn't try to pass her, didn't test her resolve. He respected it. He moved to the couch and sat down slowly, keeping her in his line of sight. From there he could see the window, the door, and her solid form standing between them. Minutes passed. Long ones. The house creaked softly as the temperature outside dropped. Somewhere nearby, a car door slammed, distant enough not to matter. She didn't react to it. Her focus remained unwavering. Then a sound, so faint he almost missed it. A soft scrape. Metal against something hard. It came from outside. Near the porch. She reacted instantly. Her head snapped downward, ears forward. Body coiled like a spring that refused to release. Another low bark escaped her, sharp, clipped. Warning. His pulse spiked. He stood slowly, heart pounding, every sense suddenly awake. He strained to hear more, but the sound didn't repeat. Silence returned. Thick. Heavy. She did not relax. Did not step back. Did not look away. He moved closer to her again, stopping just behind her shoulder. He could feel the tension radiating off her, steady and controlled. She leaned forward slightly, as if preparing, as if deciding. He swallowed hard, eyes fixed on the dark beyond the glass. Whatever was out there hadn't left, and she was making one thing very clear. She wasn't leaving either. He stood there for a long moment, just behind her, close enough to feel the warmth of her body, close enough to hear the slow, deliberate rhythm of her breathing. Each inhale measured, each exhale controlled. She wasn't panicking. She was waiting. Another sound brushed the night. This one clearer. A soft knock. Not on the door. On the window. His breath caught. She responded instantly. A sharp bark that cut through the room and stopped just as quickly. Her body surged forward half an inch, muscles tightening, then locked again. He didn't move. Didn't speak. The sound came again. Tap. Tap. From the lower corner of the window. His pulse thundered in his ears as he leaned closer, heart racing, eyes straining into the darkness. The porch light illuminated only part of the glass, leaving the rest a black mirror reflecting his own tense expression. He swallowed. "Hello," he called, voice low but steady. No answer. Just the faint rustle of fabric or leaves, or something brushing against the wall. She growled again, deeper this time. Still controlled. Still restrained. But unmistakable. He raised the phone in his hand, thumb hovering over the flashlight. He hesitated, then turned it on, angling the beam downward. The light revealed a shape. Curled. Collapsed. Right beneath the window. His heart lurched. Person. A man lay slumped against the house, half hidden in shadow. His clothes were dark, blending into the night. One arm rested awkwardly across his chest. The other lay limp at his side. He wasn't moving. "Oh my God," he breathed. She barked again once, then looked back at him, eyes wide, insistent. This wasn't a threat. This was something else. He knelt quickly, flipping the porch light brighter and unlocking the door with shaking hands. The deadbolt slid back, the chain rattled, and as the door opened, cold night air rushed in. She moved with him, not ahead of him. Beside him. Together they stepped onto the porch. The man was older than he'd expected. Maybe late 50s. His face was pale, skin slick with sweat despite the cool air. His breathing was shallow, uneven. A faint smell of alcohol mixed with something sharper, copper. Blood. "Sir," he said, kneeling beside him. "Hey, can you hear me?" The man groaned faintly, eyes fluttering open for just a second before rolling back. She lowered herself beside them, body angled toward the street, ears still alert. Guarding. Watching. Always watching. He reached for his phone again, hands trembling now as he dialed emergency services. He kept his voice calm as he explained what he saw. An unresponsive man, possible injury, breathing but weak. As he spoke, the man shifted, letting out a soft, pained sound. "It's okay," he murmured, placing a steady hand on the man's shoulder. "Help's coming." The dispatcher stayed on the line. He glanced at her. She'd moved closer now, lowering her head until it hovered just inches from the man's chest. She sniffed gently, then settled back, satisfied. as if confirming something important. Alive. Minutes stretched. Sirens wailed faintly in the distance, growing louder with each passing second. She lifted her head at the sound, ears pivoting toward it, but she didn't move away. When the ambulance pulled up, lights flashing red against the quiet street, she stood tall, body firm. She watched as the paramedics rushed forward, voices calm but urgent. "Looks like he collapsed," one of them said, checking the man's pulse. "Possible cardiac event." They worked quickly, efficiently. He stepped back, giving them space. She stayed. One paramedic paused, glancing at her. "Good dog," he said softly. "Real good dog." Her tail flicked once. Just once. They loaded the man onto a stretcher, securing him carefully before lifting him into the ambulance. As the doors closed, one of the paramedics turned back. "You did the right thing calling," she said. "If he'd stayed out here much longer." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. The ambulance pulled away, sirens fading into the night. The street returned to stillness. He stood there for a moment longer, chest rising and falling rapidly, adrenaline slowly draining from his system. The porch light hummed softly above them. He looked down at her. She looked up at him. And for the first time all night, she relaxed. Her ears softened. Her tail lowered. Her shoulders dropped as if someone had finally released a tight knot inside her. He crouched and wrapped his arms around her, pressing his face into her fur. She leaned into him immediately, steady and warm and real. "You knew," he whispered. "You knew." She sighed a deep, content sound and rested her chin against his chest. Behind them, the window reflected the porch light. Open now. Not just the glass, but the understanding. Because what she had sensed wasn't danger coming in. It was life slipping away. And she had refused to let it happen. Together, they stood on the porch a little longer, breathing in the quiet, letting the night settle again. This time the calm returned, and it stayed. Sleep did not come easily that night. Even after the door was locked again. Even after the porch light was turned off. Even after the house returned to its familiar, safe shapes. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the quiet hum of the world beyond the walls. A car passed somewhere far away. Pipes shifted softly. The clock ticked with steady patience. Beside him she slept. Or at least rested. Her body was pressed against his legs, warm and solid. Her breathing was slower now, deeper. But every so often her ears twitched, reacting to sounds he barely registered. Still working. Still alert. His heart finally began to slow. The image of the man beneath the window replayed in his mind. The way his body had been folded into itself, the unnatural stillness, the shallow rise and fall of his chest. How close it had been. Too close. If she hadn't noticed. If she hadn't refused to move. If he'd ignored her just a little longer. He exhaled slowly. Gratitude settled over him, heavy and warm. Morning arrived quietly. Soft gray light filtered through the curtains, bringing with it the ordinary sounds of a new day. A garbage truck in the distance. Birds calling from somewhere nearby. The neighbor's garage door opening. Life continuing. She lifted her head before he even opened his eyes. He felt the shift in the mattress, the familiar weight leaving his legs. When he opened his eyes, she was sitting at the edge of the bed. Ears perked, posture calm. Different. Lighter. "Morning," he murmured. Her tail thumped once against the mattress. Just once. He smiled. In the kitchen, the coffee maker gurgled to life, filling the air with its familiar grounding scent. Sunlight spilled across the counter, turning everything warm and real again. He leaned against the counter, mug in hand, and glanced toward the front window. It looked ordinary now. Just glass. Just reflections. Nothing to hint at what had happened hours earlier. A knock came at the door. He froze. She didn't. She walked calmly to his side, standing close but relaxed. No tension. No bracing. No warning. He opened the door. A police officer stood on the porch, hat in hand, expression gentle but serious. Behind him, a patrol car idled quietly at the curb. Morning, the officer said. I'm sorry to bother you. That's okay, he replied, heart picking up speed again. Is everything all right? The officer nodded. Yes. We just wanted to follow up on the call from last night. He stepped aside, letting the officer in. She watched carefully, but without concern, tail moving slowly at her side. He's alive, the officer said. The words landed with weight. Relief washed through him so suddenly that he had to steady himself against the counter. He had a heart attack, the officer continued. Collapsed while walking home. Doctor said if he'd been out there another 10, maybe 15 minutes, it could have gone very differently. He swallowed hard. That dog of yours, the officer added, glancing down at her with a soft smile. She probably saved his life. She looked up at the officer, then back at him. Her tail wagged once. Slow. Measured. As if accepting the truth without needing the praise. They asked me to pass along their thanks, the officer said. His family too. He nodded, unable to find words right away. Thank you for calling when you did, the officer added. A lot of people would have brushed it off. After the door closed behind him, the house felt quieter than usual. Not empty, just reflective. He sank onto the couch and she joined him, curling close. He rested his hand on her side, feeling the steady rhythm of her breathing beneath his palm. You changed someone's whole life, he whispered. Her ears flicked at the sound of his voice. She yawned and rested her head against his leg. Later that day, as he walked her through the neighborhood, people waved from porches. A neighbor stopped to chat, mentioning the ambulance they'd seen the night before. Everything okay? They asked. He nodded. Yeah, it is now. She walked at his side, leash loose, posture easy. The world felt different. Not more dangerous but more fragile. More precious. That night had been an interruption. A pause placed exactly where it was needed. One life stopped. Another noticed. Another responded. And because of her, because she refused to look away. The story did not end on the sidewalk beneath a dark window. It continued. Still unfolding. Still breathing. The days that followed moved more slowly. Not in a heavy way. Just deliberately. As if the world itself had decided to take smaller steps. He noticed it in the mornings first. The way sunlight seemed softer as it filtered through the front window. The way he lingered over his coffee instead of drinking it on the go. The way silence no longer felt empty but full. She noticed it too. She slept deeper now, stretched out on her side instead of curled tight. Her paws twitched only occasionally, chasing dreams that seemed calmer than before. When she woke, she did so without urgency, lifting her head slowly, eyes clear. The house had changed. Not physically. Emotionally. He found himself pausing at the window more often. Standing where she had stood. Looking out at the same patch of concrete, the same steps, the same quiet stretch of sidewalk. Nothing looked different. And yet everything did. One afternoon, a handwritten note appeared in the mailbox. He stood at the kitchen counter reading it while she sat nearby, watching him with that patient, observant gaze she'd always had. The man's daughter had written it. She thanked him for calling, for noticing, for caring. She wrote about hospital machines and late-night prayers, about how her father was recovering slowly, how the doctors said timing had made all the difference. At the bottom of the page, one sentence was underlined. Please tell your dog thank you. He lowered the paper and sat down heavily, breath leaving him in a long, quiet exhale. Emotion welled up, not sharp, not overwhelming, just deep. He rested his hand on her head. You did good, he whispered. She leaned into his touch, eyes closing halfway. As the week went on, the edge of fear faded. It didn't disappear completely, it softened, smoothed out, turned into awareness rather than worry. They returned to their routines. Morning walks, afternoon naps, evening quiet. But something had shifted between them. He listened more now. Not just to her sounds but to her silences. He noticed the way her ears adjusted when something unfamiliar passed. The way her body angled protectively without tension. The way she sometimes paused, scenting the air, then continued once satisfied. He trusted those moments. Without question. One evening, as rain tapped gently against the windows, he sat on the floor beside her, brushing her coat in slow, even strokes. The rhythmic motion calmed them both. Outside, headlights blurred across wet pavement, reflections shimmering like distant stars. She sighed and leaned her full weight against him. A simple thing, but grounding. "You know," he said quietly, not expecting an answer, "I almost didn't listen." Her tail thumped once. Soft. He smiled faintly. "I won't make that mistake again." She lifted her head and looked at him, then really looked. Her eyes were warm, steady, unreadable in the way only dogs can manage. Then she lowered her head again and closed her eyes. Message received. Healing didn't arrive all at once. Came in pieces. In the way his shoulders finally relaxed. In the way sleep returned without replaying the night on a loop. In the way laughter came easier again. One afternoon, he caught himself humming while making dinner. The sound surprised him. He hadn't realized how long it had been since he'd done that. She lay nearby, chin resting on her paws, watching him with contented eyes. The rain stopped. The clouds cleared. And the window returned to being just a window. But sometimes late at night he'd still pause before turning out the lights. He'd glance at her, curled comfortably on her bed, chest rising and falling in steady rhythm. And he'd feel it. That quiet certainty. That safety didn't come from locks or lights or routines. Came from awareness. From connection. From trust. She had given him all three. One night, as he lay in bed listening to the gentle sounds of the house, she climbed up beside him, something she hadn't done in a while. She circled once, twice, then settled with her back against his chest. He wrapped an arm around her without thinking. She relaxed completely. The kind of relaxation that only comes when there is nothing left to guard against. Outside, the street was quiet. Inside, the world felt whole again. Not because nothing could ever go wrong, but because if it did, they would face it together. Listening. Watching. Healing one quiet moment at a time. The season changed without asking permission. One morning he noticed it in the air, cooler, cleaner, carrying the faint smell of fallen leaves and distant rain. The kind of morning that felt like a fresh page. They stepped outside together, the front door closing softly behind them. She paused on the porch as she always did now, taking a moment to read the world before stepping into it. Ears forward. Nose lifting. Breath slow. Then satisfied, she moved on. He watched her with a quiet smile. He didn't rush her anymore. On their walks he let the leash stay loose. Let her stop when she needed to. Let her listen to things he couldn't hear. Sometimes she'd pause, body angled slightly, eyes focused on nothing he could see. And every time she'd relax again. Move on. The neighborhood looked the same, but it felt different. Kinder. More alive. They passed the window that night many times after, weeks, then months later, and it never held fear again. Just reflections. Just light. Just glass. But the meaning had changed. That window had become a reminder. Not of danger, but of presence. Of the quiet power of paying attention. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the living room gold, he sat on the floor beside her, back against the couch. She rested against him, her head heavy on his thigh, eyes half closed. The room smelled faintly of clean laundry, and the dinner cooling on the stove. Comfort. "I think you changed me," he said softly. She opened one eye, then closed it again. He smiled. He'd always thought of himself as responsible, careful, observant. But now he understood something deeper, something she'd known all along. Being present wasn't about watching harder. It was about listening differently, about trusting what you feel, even when you can't explain it. Outside, a breeze moved through the trees, branches tapping gently together. Somewhere down the street, laughter drifted through an open window. Life, still happening. Later that night, he stood at the front window one last time before bed. The street was calm, washed in silver light. No shadows lingered too long. No unease stirred. Behind him she slept peacefully, curled in her bed, paws twitching lightly as she dreamed. He turned away from the glass and looked at her. Truly looked. Not just as a companion, but as a partner, a guardian, a quiet, steady presence who asked for nothing and gave everything. He turned off the light and crossed the room, kneeling beside her. He brushed a hand gently over her head, careful not to wake her. "Thank you," he whispered. She stirred slightly, tail thumping once against the floor, still asleep, still knowing. In the days that followed, life returned fully to its rhythm. Work, errands, familiar routines. But something permanent had settled between them. An unspoken agreement. He would listen. She would guide. Not with commands. Not with words. But with trust. Months later they received one more message. A photo this time. The man from the sidewalk stood smiling beside his family, arm around a young girl who looked up at him with obvious pride. On the back of the photo, written in careful handwriting, "Because of you, I'm still here." He set the photo on the shelf beside her collar and leash. She watched him do it, then leaned against his leg. That night, as they settled into sleep, he felt something he hadn't felt before. Not relief, not gratitude, something quieter, something deeper. Peace, the kind that comes when you know, truly know, that you are not alone in the world. That someone is always listening, always watching, always ready to stand between you and what you cannot see. The house rested around them. The window stayed closed. And the bond between them, sealed in one quiet night, one unshakable instinct, remained. Unbreakable. Forever.